Hi, everybody. Well, when you kind of sit around and have nothing to do but think about things that don't really matter, you come up with things like this. So, if you look at my meter, you see this. I use this thing all the time in a lot of my videos, and it is a Fluke 187. And there are other meters with the same feature. But when you go to the ohms mode, all right, we all know what ohms is. I hope we do. And you have if you push this blue button, it lets you scroll through a couple of other functions. One of them is continuity, and that's just when you short the terminals to get, it'll show you continuity. It'll beep to let you know that there's continuity. But this third one, this NS, what is that? Well, it's actually a measurement of admittance or conductance, and it's measured in Siemens, but this meter actually measures in nanosiemens, or 10 to the negative ninth Siemens. What is a Siemens? Well, it is a measurement of conductance. Conductance or admittance is the reciprocal of resistance. So if you take resistance in ohms, you take 1 divided by ohms, it's going to equal the admittance in Siemens. So 1 ohm would equal 1 Siemens in admittance. 10 ohms would equal 0.1 Siemens of admittance, if that makes sense. The other word that was used prior to Siemens, Siemens is the last name of the person who came up with this type of measurement, measuring admittance. Originally, it was called mhos, which is ohms spelled backwards. I think that's pretty cool too. And a lot of modern science folks just lose their crap when you use the word mhos instead of Siemens. But I digress. Anyhow, what good is it? Well, this mode on this meter is designed for measuring things that are very, very, very high resistance. It's easier to measure the admittance of something that's very high resistance than to measure its actual resistance in great big amounts of ohms. So what could we do with it? Well, I got to thinking, what if we tried to measure the leakage of a film capacitor using nanosiemens mode? And how could we convert that into something that would make any kind of sense? And that's kind of what I did here. So I just used this plug, and you can see it here, and it has these set screws normally where you'd put your wires. I took those out and just put a couple of stainless steel screws in there. And that just kind of eliminates lead, any kind of interference from the leads, capacitive interference or anything like that. Because this is very sensitive. If I put my finger on here, you could see it goes kind of crazy there, doesn't it? So anyway, now the first thing you have to know is a film capacitor, such as this, is a pretty good one. And it's 0.47 microfarads. These will have very, very, very low leakage. So the resistance, the leakage resistance would be extremely high, to the point that if you put this just on ohms, so we go into ohms and we put this in here, you'll read something for a little bit while it charges. If I can get this in here. Come on, Tony. There we go. But eventually, it'll just go to 0 ohms. See, it's going up to nothing. So you really can't read leakage on something like this because it's so tiny that the meter is not capable of reading it. Now, here's the thing. You can't just switch this over to nanosiemens right now. It'll mess the reading up because the tiny little bit of current that is being passed through this capacitor has charged it up. And the nanosiemens mode on this is so sensitive that you would not even, it would look at that charge on there and would throw your setting off. So you have to make sure that it's drained. So you want to short out the leads and kind of leave it like that for a while. And then while we're doing that, we'll switch this over to nanosiemens. And then you take this over here and put it into the terminals. This just gives us a good connection. And you can see it's going to take a while for this thing to null out because it's still charging that capacitor. And it's just a tiny little amount of the voltage, but it's still charging the capacitor. And you're going to see this will read something, but it's going to be very tiny. And given enough time, this will probably null out somewhere. It's going to be pretty soon now. Pretty close. It might drop to 0.05, it might not. So let's say it's 0.06. 0.05, there we go. All right, so to convert this, here's where it gets tricky, is that you have a lot of exponents to deal with. You know, 1 nanosiemens is 10 to the negative 9th Siemens. And ohms, you're going to have great big amounts of ohms. So I want to convert it to something like giga ohms, which is 10 to the 9th ohms. And you would think just those would cancel out. It'd be really easy to do. But the way that things like an Excel spreadsheet or little programs like that handle exponents on a computer, they don't deal very well with that sometimes. So it can be kind of tricky. So instead, I just, with the help of Gemini and ChatGPT and those things, I wrote a little, or we wrote a little Python program because I figured that'd be the easiest way to do it. And even that, I had to kind of run it through Gemini a couple times to get it to make it right because mine wasn't working. But here's what I came up with. I'll move you over to here. There's a little program, and I'll show it to you here in the end. And I'll hit, it says enter, oh, I'm going to run the program. There we go. Enter the admittance value in nanosiemens, and you can see right now it says 0.05. So I'll enter 0.05. And it says that the resistance is 20 giga ohms. Yeah, 20 billion ohms. And again, that's not going to be super accurate because still there's things that can cause, you know, inside the meter and everything, it still could be not super accurate, but it'll give you a good representation. Now, here's the thing. If we take this out of here, and I have this meter propped up so you don't see glare, and I got the old Leak-O-Matic here. Come on. There we go. Have the old Leak-O-Matic, and I have it discharging as well. And it'll actually, you will have a little bit of dielectric absorption if you leave this open for too long. Even put your fingers on it for a while, it will put some charge on there, which will just take it longer to stabilize. If you put a capacitor on there with even the tiniest little bit of charge, the meter has to overcome that before you get, you know, before it'll null out, especially if you have the polarity switched around. So I'll come back in a couple minutes because this will take a couple of minutes, but you can see already how high it is compared to that other one. You know, you're 16 nanosiemens. So let's give it a few minutes to stabilize and let's see where it ends up. Okay, it's been about 3 minutes now, and it's really slowing down. This is probably going to null out somewhere between 10 and 11 nanosiemens. And remember, this is a much smaller capacitor value because this one is 0.47 microfarads. This one is 0.05 microfarads, so, you know, a factor of 10 difference. So this is a much smaller capacitance, but yet it's taking forever, ever for this thing to charge up. And it's because of the leakage. And when this thing finally does settle, it's probably going to be around 10 nanosiemens or so. Let's just say that, okay? Because you can see it's still moving ever so slightly. And it will creep its way down, probably to about 10, and then it'll kind of settle. It has really slowed down, though, after, you know, since I first connected it, though. So let's run the program again. Let's just assume it was 10 nanosiemens. All right, so enter the admittance value in nanosiemens, 10. And you can see it's 100 mega ohms, or 0.1 gigaohms, which is still pretty high. These foil capacitors, if they're anything over 30 or 50 mega ohms, they're going to work just fine, in an old AM radio or something. But just so you know, the leakage is way, way, way higher than on one of these. You can see that. So you can see how slow it's getting now. So it's going to be around 10 nanosiemens, somewhere around there. So anyway, this is a pretty impractical way to test a capacitor for leakage, because you can see how long it takes. And any of these really super high impedance test devices like this do this, when they don't apply much current. And this is, to me, not a real effective way of checking leakage, especially under voltage, because this is putting almost nothing onto the capacitor. So it's really just checking kind of open leakage. But when you start applying high voltage and current to the capacitor to charge it up and everything, and then you put a high potential between the two electrodes of a capacitor, a lot of times the material in there will break down and you'll get leakage. This can't really test for that. None of these really low voltage devices can do that. But this will at least give you an idea of how capacitors, how they work, the differences between them. And even this brand new out of the box, these foil caps, they're going to have some degree of leakage like that to them. Whereas these Mylar film caps, as you can see, very, very low. And probably a ceramic capacitor will show no leakage at all. Let's try one real quick and then we'll wrap this up. So here's a 0.01 ceramic capacitor, 0.01 microfarads. You can see it's still creeping down there a little bit, but it's actually, it actually has more leakage than this really good film capacitor had. It is creeping down, but it's kind of going back up. So look, that one's around, I'd say 0.08 nanosiemens. So let's run the little program on that. So 0.08 nanosiemens. And you can see that one is about 12.5 gigaohms, as opposed to the 20 gigaohms that this one had. So that just goes to show that, well, I thought the ceramic would beat the crap out of this, but obviously it doesn't. So anyway, I don't know how practical this is. This is just playing around. But I guess you can check a capacitor for leakage, even though it's very slow, and I don't know. Anyway, just something fun to play with, and I just thought I'd share that with you all. Take care, everybody. And by the way, in case any of you are interested, here's the code for converting nanosiemens to gigaohms. So if you want to do a screen print and copy that, and you can type that into Python if you like. And that's it.